Welcome to the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, bringing you bi-weekly discussions designed to help you grow your business and create the lifestyle you desire. Elevate your business with proven strategies from virtual CFOs, CPAs, and business advisors. We discuss real-world challenges solved with actionable steps that get you the results you need both in business and building the life you deserve.
Welcome to episode number 166 of the Cultivating Business Growth podcast, brought to you by Willow Virtual CFO. Today we are talking about insurance and how we can optimize that for dental practices. To help us break this down, I'm excited to welcome our guest, Adriana Steinberg. Adriana is a key member of the sales team at Apex Reimbursement Specialists, where she works closely with dental practices to optimize insurance reimbursements and increase revenue. With a deep understanding of PPO fee negotiations, credentialing, and dental billing, Adriana has helped practices of all sizes, from solo practitioners to large DSOs, successfully navigate the ever-changing insurance landscape. Adriana, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.
As I was mentioning earlier, one of the reasons we wanted to bring you on is because as I talk to a lot of dental practice owners, one of their biggest stresses when I ask them, what's on your mind on the financial side of your business, insurance is a big response. Insurance is a stress, so that's why I wanted to bring you here, hopefully give them a resource, a better understanding of, how they can handle it. So I'm super excited to have you, and I'm sure you've got a lot of good tidbits to share with them.
Okay. Sounds good.
So we're going to start. Can we start with just the current insurance landscape for dental practices? Can you talk to me about how that is evolving and impacting dental practices today?
Yeah. So I would say in general, the landscape has become quite sophisticated, right? So first of all, most practices that, I speak to are 80% PPO, 20% cash. Okay. Mm-hmm. And most practices don't even know that they could negotiate, or they feel like I negotiated, I got a great increase, but there was no data to analyze what that actually meant, right? So they just accepted it, moved on. When I say that it's become more sophisticated, I'm specifically speaking to the third-party lease networks and umbrellas. So we have a lot of shifting relationships between carriers that historically you could only contract with directly. So for example, the Aetnas, the Humanas, the United Healthcares, the MetLifes, really big names and important payers to practices, now have relationships with some third-party lease networks. And some of the names that might sound familiar are Carrington, Connection, Dentamax, whatnot. Mm-hmm. What that means is you actually, you can be reimbursed at different levels just because of the shifting of relationships without even notification. So while you think, or while a provider may think that they're getting reimbursed at X fee schedule, at any point, those carriers have the discretion to reimburse you at whichever fee schedule someone has a relationship with. And 90% of the time, they're going to default to the lowest. And so this lack of understanding is such a key component to the practice. And really one of the components that I actually get very excited about, because if the office staff is not clear on how each provider is currently contracted and what fee schedule they need to follow, then that is absolutely overflowing into their AR, right? Yep. Because they could be collecting more money. They don't know what to look at for an EOB, to ensure that the way that they're contracted is actually the way they need to be reimbursed. So our job here is to simplify the office's relationship with the insurance companies to have a better understanding and ensure that they are optimizing their participation for those higher reimbursements. Yeah. Okay, that was a lot that I just threw out.
That's a huge, it's a huge, opportunity to receive more money, right? That means more revenue, and that means more profitability on the bottom line. Do you typically see, is it the office manager whose role in the dental practice is typically the one who would be doing this negotiation? Is it usually the office manager? Is it the doctor?
No,
Who?
so I would say the doctor should be with the patients, and the doctor wants to be with the patients. The
Right.
doctor is going to have this frustration, right? That I'm not collecting. I have this feeling that I'm not collecting as much as I could, and this resentment towards insurance companies. That's just across the board, right? But a lot of that
Mhm.
is lack of knowledge or lack of
Mhm.
attention that's been put on that business portion of the practice. Generally, the office manager will be the one that's tasked with doing that.
Okay.
Um, no disrespect. I love working with office managers, and most of them really know what they're doing and contribute on a positive level to the practice. But let's be honest, they're tasked with so much to run that practice. Negotiating and understanding, the insurance landscape takes a lot of time, a lot of follow up, and a lot of data analysis. So they could be somewhat limited because of those
Mhm.
factors. So having a company like Apex really look at the practices, PPO participation, and negotiate with those carriers, optimize how they're, participating really does impact the practice and add a tremendous amount of revenue to make that practice more profitable while being happy with the patients that you're serving and giving them quality care.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that's difficult in a lot of these different areas is just that you don't have expertise in everything, right? As the office manager, you wear a lot of hats because you're helping the dentist, and the owner, but you just may not know enough of the intricacies that you're talking about to be able to do a good job of negotiating because you don't have all that data. So I think there is, a gap there in trying to be able to negotiate. They may want to be doing it and they may be doing it in good faith and the best they can,
Right,
but
of course.
sometimes you just don't have all the information.
Or you don't know what you don't know. I'll give
Right.
you a very typical example. Let's say you have a practice, you've got two providers there, right? They hired an associate, so they know they need to credential and get in network, right?
Hmm.
So then if the office manager doesn't have a clear understanding of how they're contracted, they're just going to start submitting applications to the insurance companies.
Hmm.
And I would say 85% of the time when we do that first step of confirming how the providers are currently contracted, they're not contracted the same way. And if they're not contracted the same way, they're still a network, let's say, with Aetna,
Hmm.
but one's going to be probably reimbursed at a higher level than the other.
Okay.
So anytime we're going to credential a provider, we want to make sure they're being credentialed, number one, like the other providers in the office to
Right.
streamline, right?
Right.
And number two, at the optimal level. So that's another opportunity where we can generate additional revenue.
And the credentialing process, that's something I'm not as familiar with, is that each doctor or provider has to be credentialed separately to be in
Correct. Not
network.
just
It
a
doesn't matter
practice.
that the office it's each actual dentist has to be credentialed and approved to be in network.
Exactly. That
Okay.
contract is between provider and carrier. And, because when you submit a claim, it has to be the treating provider there. So in order
Yep.
to be reimbursed as an in-network provider, you have to be recognized.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. So let's talk into some strategies of maximizing your insurance reimbursement. Do you want to start with PPO fee negotiations? Because I know PPOs are a lot of talk I hear is that we're just getting rid of PPOs. We want to, they're not reimbursing us enough. We just want to get rid of them. What is your experience and how do you, recommend negotiating so that you can still keep PPOs as an option? Because I think a lot of people still want to use whatever those benefits that they have for dental, without maybe getting rid of them altogether.
No, so great question. I think that it is common, that a practice may want to go out of network with a carrier. Again, there's a lot of perception, and so we're very data driven. So I always
Mhm.
recommend first is let me look at your production by carrier. Where's the revenue coming from, right? They may think that most of the revenue is coming from X carrier, but when you look at the data, actually that X character is not really impacting the revenue like you thought it was.
Mhm.
If a practice is considering going out of network, I always suggest doing a round of negotiations because it's possible that we negotiate a fee schedule to a level where now they're happy and they can then continue to be an in-network provider. Once that whole negotiations process has been complete and we've optimized how the office is participating, then we could take a deeper dive. Again, let's look at how much revenue, how many patients. You can't just go out of network without thinking, oh, I might lose a third of these patients, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, am I okay with that? So
Right.
those are a lot of things to consider. And then having us guide them and strategize them, based on knowledge and data is very, very valuable.
So you don't recommend just making a decision to not accept PPOs, but instead negotiate, have conversations with them, see if you can't get a better rate. I do find it personally. I do also use the like, well, I'm going to be taking my business elsewhere. So now what is the best, cost I can get for whatever I may be discussing? Like for real, I'm just going to go somewhere else. So what is the best deal you can give me? So do you see that when push comes to shove that the PPOs or the insurance will negotiate a little bit better?
No, so that's a really good question. So we always have to speak to the client, right?
Mhm.
How hard do you want us to push?
Right.
I mean, we're going to push as hard as we want. What I'm saying
Mhm.
is, if you get a final offer and you're still not satisfied, then the question becomes, do you want
Are
me
you willing
to?
to walk away? Right.
Exactly.
You have to be willing to
That
walk away if you say that
exactly.
you're going to walk away.
Exactly. Because if you want me to play that card, I mean, I can do it, not threatening. There's our
Right.
relationships with the reps are really important. So we're
Right.
not playing a game here, right? The interest of the provider is what we're representing, right? And
Mhm.
we're speaking on behalf of the provider. And the provider very well might, be having serious conversations internally that this isn't working for us, right?
Mhm.
And overhead has increased and whatever it may be. And we are considering going at a network. Does that sometimes work? Yes. And it's really going to depend on the market. It's going to
Mhm.
depend on how many providers in that area do they have. Are they willing to lose that business, right? Because they need your business as much as you need theirs in a lot of cases.
Right.
So yes, it is a tactic.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and I feel like doing it honestly, like, hey, I know I can make more money doing it a different way, and I'm going to take that if you can't give me something that I feel like is reasonable. I feel like
right.
it's a very, I'm not trying, to your point, I'm not trying to like push your back against the wall and I'm just saying this. I just, if you're in a practice and hey, I can get more money into my practice and I don't think I'll lose a lot of patients by doing this. Hey, this is my alternative that I'm going to take. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, just being honest, like, hey, this is where I'm at. I got to do what's best for the practice, but I'd like to stay in network. So how do we make that work? So yeah, I see.
I think negotiations is low hanging fruit. We never take our first offer, and we're going to leverage as much data as we can because we've worked with over 5,000 practices. We have active or non-active clients in that area. It's all across the country. So we know what's available. So when we leverage that data, oftentimes we'll benchmark and supply that carrier with some other fee schedules that office is participating with.
Mhm.
Skew the numbers a little bit, but just so they really see that you're way off from other
Okay.
carriers
Yeah.
that they're in network with.
Yeah. I mean, if you have backup support, that obviously helps. And then another key strategy, credentialing. We talked a little bit about that. So why is that crucial? And how can practices streamline that process?
Yeah, I think, the main reason is number one, compliance, right? If you're sending out claims as the treating provider, I mean, your claim needs to reflect who is the treating provider. So in order to be compliant with that carrier contract, you need to be in network. Um, I think also, I briefly touched upon, if you're not credentialed in an optimal way and you didn't really evaluate or negotiate those fees prior and you didn't look at if there was another way that you could contract, then you're leaving money on the table. So you want eyes on that and an analysis done prior to submitting applications.
Okay, that makes sense. And then for dental billing, do you have any best practices for efficient billing so that they are avoiding that revenue loss?
I think in our experience, right, what we like to do generally when we're speaking to someone who's considering outsourcing their billing, right, it could be that, I mean, generally what they like to do, I mean, what we hear is I'm open to outsourcing because I want to take that burden off my staff,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're doing so much and I want to take it off. So, accurate billing is huge. That's money that is yours. So you want a lot of attention on that. So
Right.
streamlining that and having a team that, on a daily basis, remotes in and submits claims and then does the follow up for those claims and manages denials. I would say oftentimes the denial part, like when we take over, we're hoping the denials are minimum, right? Because we know
Right.
what to submit in order to get paid. But
Yes.
a lot of times, let's say an office is submitting a claim and it got denied, it's going to be a lot more work than to, get what's needed, resubmit it to the insurance carrier, and then start that cycle again of following up so that you could get paid
Mm-hmm.
accordingly.
Yep.
Um,
Do you typically advise them to outsource it, or do you prefer, or do you see it works better and is more efficient if they do it internally with a person?
I'm a proponent of outsourcing just because I
Okay.
see how efficient it runs.
Okay.
That's what they're doing. You have a whole team who's working
Okay.
it. What we like to do when we're speaking to somebody who's interested is prior to even engaging, we'll have our team go in at no cost and do a discovery to see what the health of the AR is. And we want to
Okay.
then have a follow-up meeting with the doctor and say, listen, this is how much revenue you've got that's current.
Mm-hmm.
This is as much that's past due. And then it could even be outstanding 120 plus that might soon timely file out and you can't even collect on that, right? So again, having a team just focused on that, it's your money. You want to make sure that you're
Yeah.
collecting that. You've done the work.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And yeah. Let's talk about tailoring strategies for different types of dental practices, right? We talked that you've worked with different sizes. So what are those different strategies for solo practice owners versus the group and DSOs and maybe even startups? Do you have different processes that you take them through or recommend for them?
So with regards to our solos and our DSOs, I would say our process is the same,
Okay.
right? What's different is when you do have a DSO, even an emerging DSO, 2 location, 10 location, 15,
Mhm.
we are going to leverage the size of the group. And oftentimes, if they're on different locations or on different fee schedules, one's higher, we're always going to fight to have that higher one applied to the other ones. Again, not
Okay.
only does it streamline,
Yeah.
for the for the DSO to understand, it's much easier.
Hmm.
Um, but also, we want to optimize revenue from all of them, right?
Right.
In the world of startups and transitions, which we manage, the negotiation component the process is the same. However, when you are opening up a practice, you need to really research the market to figure out what insurance companies, if that's the route you want to go, is to be a PPO participating provider, are going to bring me the most potential patient flow. So, in order to identify which those carriers are, Apex likes to research the market and identify the largest employers, the number of employees they have, and the dental benefits they offer. Then I have a list. Okay, who do I want to target? So then we reach out to those insurance companies and we negotiate the best possible fee schedule. Direct, and again, optimizing and seeing if we could access those through a third-party lease network, doing an analysis, reviewing the analysis and the difference in fees with the provider. We have our roadmap set up and then start submitting applications to become in network. Generally, with a startup, I like to say, let's start 4 to 6 months in advance. There's no penalty to being in network earlier than opening. But let us have, if there's the luxury of time, give us the opportunity to negotiate those fees, because you're not going to be able to negotiate them for another 18, 24 months. So
Okay.
we want, okay.
Yep.
In the world of transition, right, you're purchasing a practice. So that is a wonderful opportunity to negotiate your fees. Okay. Now you have a buyer. You have to let the carrier know that a purchase is being made and there's a new tax ID. So oftentimes a carrier may just slip in a new fee schedule if you just start credentialing that's lower than the seller's.
Oh, no.
So you want
Yeah.
eyes on that, right?
Right.
I'm not saying it's intentional, but it happens.
Mhm.
But that's a wonderful time to look at like, okay, these are the carriers the seller has been in network with and that most of the patient base comes from. I don't want to disrupt that right now. I want to, get to know those patients, build that relationship and loyalty. Very smart move, right? So then, okay, I want to then, if these are the carriers that I want to go and network with, I want to make sure that I negotiate those fees prior to that new contract coming into effect. So
So it
just little
sounds
nuances
so
depending on
yeah,
the
so the process high level is the same, but there's a
exactly,
little bit more timing and nuances with a startup or a new acquisition.
exactly,
And yeah,
exactly,
anytime you have an opportunity, you want to take that opportunity for sure and to negotiate.
absolutely,
I feel like
absolutely,
that's a great time and a good reason, right? You're not just calling out of the blue saying, "Hey," you're like, "Hey, I want to look at this and I want to get the best, rates for myself."
and again, you don't know what you don't know. So if the office
Right.
manager's tasked with managing this process, whether it be tin change or, a startup or an existing, I'm just not sure that they're aware
Yeah, and
of
they have so many
about
things. If it's a brand new practice, it's not like the
exactly,
one thing you need to do is go do this, right? It's
exactly,
multiple things. So
exactly.
that's very helpful information. So let's talk financial impact. So how does optimizing these insurance processes lead to more sustainable profitability?
I mean, simple answer is you're getting more money for the services that you're rendering, right?
Yeah.
Because of those negotiations. So you will see, let's say we looked at 12-month production prior to starting to working with a practice, and then, we looked 12 months later and looked at the difference in terms of reimbursement and collections. You will see a difference there because you're just getting
Right.
paid more. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's all about the top line, right? If you can get more on the top line, you have more um, on the bottom line. So it makes a lot of sense, and it makes it a really important aspect of running your dental practice, right? The whole point is being profitable, making money, being able to reinvest into the practice, being able to take pay as a doctor, be
Hmm.
able to pay people well. So it's not, I feel like it's not like you're trying to be greedy, right? And I know that the rates that some of these doctors are getting, they feel like they're getting really undercut.
Absolutely.
And so I feel like, negotiation is not always comfortable and fun, but it's really worth it. And there's a really big, you know, um, positive outcome if you go through that process and, you see it on the bottom line.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is, in the scenarios, like let's say you get your reimbursements heightened and then a year later you analyze and your collections are still the same and your write-off percentage is the same, then we're going to want to look at your dental billing because that should not be, right? The
Yeah,
collection should have
definitely
risen
gone
in
up.
proportion to that.
Right.
One thing I didn't speak about, and it's actually really important, and sorry to go backwards, is
No, it's
when
fine.
we are looking at a practice, whether it be startup transition, existing, whatever it might be, we want to look at their office fees. Even though most of these practices are, 20% less cash, right? Or fee for service portion of it.
Hmm.
I want to see what those fees look like compared to the market and those providers in your zip code. If your office fees, what you charge that non-insured patient, what your claims are going out with is below market, that is going to affect your reimbursements because a carrier is going to think that the fee schedule they have in place is great, right? The
Hmm.
closest it is to UCR, the better it looks.
Hmm.
So we want to adjust that when we do that analysis so we can leverage that competitive data as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And can you talk about the importance of tracking and analyzing insurance reimbursement trends? Like, do you have any recommendations on how to do that at the practice level? Like, what should they be looking at? Are there certain types of reports they can look at to kind of see what those trends are? If they're, maybe they're getting less and less and less money versus, if they make a change, then they can start to see, oh, look, we're getting more money. Are there standard reports or I know there's all kinds of different dental billing systems, so I don't know if there is anything like that, but just how do we should be tracking. We want people to be tracking and how do you recommend doing so?
I think here we like to benchmark,
Okay.
right? We
Sure.
like to benchmark each fee schedule against each other. And we would probably do that every, once a year. I guess that's the best answer that comes to my mind in terms of
Okay.
how we solve that in terms of
And
tracking.
is that something the office manager can do, or is that just something you would be able to do at your kind of
It
role?
depends on what her capacity is.
Yeah.
If I have the fee schedules, then I can
You
just
just
do
compare
an
them.
analysis. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
To each
I mean, I
one.
just had this happen with a practice of ours who Delta is their major, payer.
Mm-hmm.
And they thought, oh my gosh, I mean, this happened last night. And they thought like, oh my gosh, these fees are the worst, the worst, the worst, whatever. So we decided to benchmark the carriers that we were able to increase against Delta. And guess whose fee schedule is higher?
Uh-oh. Delta.
Delta. So now they changed their perception. Like they looked at the
Okay.
data and they're like, whoa, this isn't as bad as I thought. They happen to be a specialist office, so generally a specialist office is going to have higher reimbursements.
Okay. Yeah, that makes
But
sense.
Again, data doesn't lie. You
Yeah,
got to
it's
go granular.
perspective. It could look bad, but
You got to go granular. Yeah.
yeah, I got to look at all of it. So yeah, I like that. That's really helpful. Um, so any proactive steps to take today so that they can, increase their revenue in the long term?
I mean, I love speaking to people. I love educating them. I love sharing the expertise here. We have a very robust team here of a negotiations department, credentialing, compliance, billing, and 3 partners who have 30 years of experience in the insurance world. So we're very well known in the industry. So if you need help, even on the marketing side or whatnot, it may not be something we could do, but I can make an introduction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Someone needs a CPA. It's not something that we do, but those relationships are things that we share. I would invite anybody to just schedule a call with me or somebody on our team. We want to learn more about your practice and the makeup. Maybe we will request certain data. Let's look at it. And then, I will honestly say areas in which I think we could provide value and impact the bottom line. So that's what I would say. I think that I encourage providers and their office staff to, speak. We're a resource here. We have expertise. There's nothing to lose. We could end the conversation and be like, you guys are in great shape, or we're not a right match because the insurance companies that you're in network with actually don't negotiate. But that peace of mind of knowing that, like, oh, okay, I had it in the back of my head that, whatever, we might not be doing great, and here's a solution.
Yeah, knowledge is power. You gotta get the knowledge. So, how can our listeners find you, Adriana, and connect with you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, Adriana Steinberg. You can go to our website, Apex Reimbursement Specialists.com. You can call us at the office, or you can email me.
Awesome. Can you leave us with one piece of advice that you think all dental practices should do in regards to their insurance?
I think attention needs to be paid to the insurance business portion of the practice. I think it's an area that is overlooked, and I think just understanding on a foundational level how the providers in the practices are contracted and negotiating and looking at credentialing. And I just think that having eyes look at that as a whole, like you don't have to do it all the time. I'm talking like 18, 24 months, I think is key. I just think a lot of times they don't know that you can negotiate. They have no understanding or limited understanding of how credentialing comes into play in affecting your reimbursements. And also, in the world of dental billing, of how efficient the system can be. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's super important. Education, right? So if you are looking for more information on understanding and being more educated on your insurance and how you can negotiate, reach out to Adriana. She'll talk more to you. She's great to chat with. As she said, like us, we like to build relationships. We like to learn. Maybe we can help, maybe not, but it's worth a conversation. Get yourself more knowledge so that you can make good decisions and push more money to the bottom line.
Yep, I would love it. I look forward to speaking to you.
Yeah. So thank you, everybody, for listening today. Keep that momentum going, and we will see you next time.
Okay. Thank you, Jamie.